Hey, Dr. Jon Finn here. Welcome to the Habit Mechanic podcast. Right now, you can get my new best-selling book, Train Your Brain for the AI Revolution, at tougherminds.co.uk. The digital book, audiobook, and physical book are all available at a special price that you won't find anywhere else.
Welcome to this Tougher Minds podcast, which looks in detail at one of the concepts within the elite business athlete. That's the name of our ebook, which is available for free on the Tougher Minds website. The elite business athlete explains how performance secrets from global sporting icons can be beneficial and transformative for everyone. The book provides an overview of key concepts that boost resilience, personal performance, and well-being. In this podcast, Dr. Jon Finn discusses the Tougher Minds concept of activation. That's the term he's developed to better describe feelings including anxiety and other related emotional states. Jon Finn started the podcast by explaining more about activation and how Tougher Minds training uses the concept to benefit people.
We know that anxiety has an important impact on our health, our happiness, our performance. But increasingly, we understand that anxiety isn't necessarily a bad thing. And anxiety is really a physiological, biological, neurobiological response of your brain to something. It might be something that's threatening to you. It might be something that you're nervous about. But it equally might be something that is interesting to you, or maybe exciting to you. And really, it's a way of your body becoming alert and getting ready to do something. So we know that anxiety is important, and it's really important to understand what it is. But when you use that language, it's just got such a negative connotation. So in my own work through the years, working with lots of different groups of people, I felt that we needed some different language and a different explanation of that very important process, so that people could understand, first of all, what it was, but also how to manage it and how to manage it in different situations. And that's how activation evolved. And visually, the way that activation looks is a dial going from 0, 0 all the way up to 100. And the numbers on that dial represent your body's state of alertness. So if you're at 0, 0 on the scale, it means that you're dead. And then if you get higher up the numbers on the scale, you're becoming more alert, until you get all the way around to the high numbers, your 90s, your 100s, where you might be really pumped up, you might be anxious, you might be nervous, might be an excitement there as well. So in its simplest sense, activation is a reflection of your state of alertness at any one point in time, and that varies throughout the day. Obviously, when you go to sleep, your alertness is very, very low. When you go for a run, your alertness might increase. If you've had a big lunch and it's the afternoon, your alertness might be quite low when you need to be a bit higher. So we're always at a certain number on the scale, but it's not always the optimal number for the thing that we're trying to achieve.
And am I right in thinking that you work with people to show them not only this understanding and this insight of their fluctuation in emotional state and state of alertness, but how they can understand that better so it can benefit them, and indeed how they can control it?
Sure, yeah. So we're always working up the continuum from the knowledge about something, but then to the skill and ultimately to the habit. So we want people to understand this, but also we want them to understand how to regulate it as well. So having some skills to manage that, and almost just getting the habit of achieving optimal activation as often as possible.
Now, in the Elite Business Athlete, a specific chapter of the book is devoted solely to activation, and specifically to one very well-known international sports team that doesn't explicitly refer to activation because, as we've said, it's a Tougher Minds concept, but something that shows a very, very similar understanding and insight. And this team is the New Zealand All Blacks, of course, back-to-back winners of Rugby World Cups, which was a first in the world of rugby union. A fantastic win rate, all-time win rate, a litany of success, and they are symbolic of excellence in performance. Just explain to us, Jon, the way the All Blacks approach this particular phenomena.
Well, to give some history to the All Blacks, although they've always been a very high-performing rugby team, they seem to find World Cups problematic in the sense they couldn't sort of replicate their form that they'd showed sort of in the 4 years in between World Cups. And they often found what they described that they choked sort of in World Cup finals or semi-finals. So they did a review of their training program of the things that they were practicing, and they recognised that the mental aspect of the game wasn't something they were focusing on, as well as their fitness or their technical and tactical skills. So they decided to pay much more attention to the mental side of the game, and this led to a focus on different mental skills. But one of the mental skills that they paid attention to was being able to make sure that they were, as we would call it, activated enough to perform their roles in the field. So to make the tackles, to catch the ball under pressure when they needed to make decisions well when they needed to, but also make sure that they weren't over-activated so that they were giving away, silly free kicks or making incorrect decisions or making basic errors because their arousal levels were too high. And they refer to this as blue head, red head, so that when they recognise they're in a red head state, too high on the activation scale, they have strategies to bring them back down to the blue head state. And when they recognise that they're in the maybe blue head state and they need to push themselves a bit more into the red head state, they've got some strategies to push themselves upwards as well.
So that understanding of which state or where you need to be, shall we say, to execute certain tasks which are critical to performance in the best way possible, that understanding is something they've harnessed and used, and that's something you also work with people to help them to develop, I understand.
Yeah, when you say, well, how do you transfer that into the office? Well, you need to be alert. The concentration isn't a uni construct. There are lots of different components to it. So the first component to concentrating well is alertness, activation. So if you're sitting at your desk and you're not alert, well, it's going to be very hard to pay the kind of attention you need to pay to do your job really well. So it's an activation problem. If you're stressed out at work, there are a lot of things going on. When you're going home at night, so you're not being able to sleep, that's an activation problem. So you need to recognise, first of all, what optimal activation levels you need to be at throughout the day. And this is a 24-hour thing. It's not just special times of the day you need to pay attention to it. It influences everything from your sleep all the way from not getting annoyed at your employee or your boss and becoming too stressed out because of that. You need to recognise where you need to be at different points and get good at getting yourself there regularly and building that habit up. The same, for our school and education clients. If you're sitting in a classroom and you're not at the right activation level, you can't learn anything because you don't have kind of neurotransmitters we need in our brain like dopamine or noradrenaline to actually be able to get your prefrontal cortex to be paying attention to the new information that you need to pay attention to in order to learn it.
So in the same way that perhaps if a rugby player was snarling and spitting in the dressing room and wanting to absolutely cream the opposition with some brutal tactics, that's counterproductive for them because they might be penalised and sent off perhaps. If somebody came into a work context, perhaps cross about something, angry about something that happened interpersonally, that's equally as counterproductive and for the same reasons.
Yeah, because in the workplace situation, it shuts down your clever brain, your PFC, your prefrontal cortex. because he just gets overwhelmed with the negative emotions. So you can't think clearly. And it's quite clear, everyone knows when they've had a bad day, it takes time to recover. Research says it takes 3 days to recover back to normal cognitive function if you've had a bad day at work. So we can get overwhelmed very easily by unhelpful emotions, and that will be represented by being too activated on the activation scale that we have. You know, the trouble with managing our thoughts, our cognitions, is that they're invisible, they're not real. So a lot of what the Tougher Minds work starts out with is trying to help people to understand these invisible concepts first of all, which is why we have this core set of language and symbols that we use, you know, activation being part of that set.
Now, there is plenty more for anyone who wants to find out more about activation in the free ebook, The Elite Business Athlete, which you can download from tougherminds.co.uk. So do check that out. As I say, there is a specific chapter in the book about activation. But I understand there's a couple of things you would advise people to do in terms of activation. And the first one would be to have a think about perhaps monitoring it and identifying what your best activation level would be for certain tasks or certain key times in the day, and then what your usual activation level is.
Yeah, so self-watching is where we always begin. Being mindful of, well, what does my activation need to be at? For example, when I go to sleep, for example, to have a productive afternoon, for example, when I get annoyed at someone. And then, currently, where is my activation? And is there a mismatch between the two? Two of those areas might be fine, one you might need to work on. So, yeah, if we're going to change ourselves, self-watching is the key thing. This is cognitive behavioural therapy. It's about metacognition, thinking about what you're thinking about. Yeah.
And then the other thing, and as I say, more on this in the Elite Business Athlete ebook, and also people can check out the Tougher Minds website more generally, tougherminds.co.uk. Lots of videos on there in the blog section and in some of the specific sections, which will help you understand this and a broad range of concepts that Tougher Minds use. But I also understand you would say that certain breathing techniques could be immediately helpful to people in terms of controlling and managing their activation. A lot more training needed to really maximize it, clearly, but nevertheless, it's just something worth understanding.
Yeah, there are two broad ways that you can influence activation. The short-term one is controlling breathing. This breathing is the body's trigger to excite certain neurotransmitters or to reduce certain neurotransmitters. Your body's very clever, and it sort of understands the gas exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide, and it's always monitoring that. So when we start to breathe faster, our body recognises that that's probably for a reason. Or sometimes when we have a threat, our body increases our breathing for us in order to excite the brain to get ready, for action, the kind of fight or flight idea that people are familiar with. So breathing is very central, and controlling of breathing, and most of the time for people, breathing is just a completely subconscious process. But if we bring breathing and make it to a conscious process, for example, purposely slowing our breathing down or speeding our breathing up by moving around and exercising, that can stimulate activation by increasing it or reducing it. And you can teach people strategies around that. The newfangled way of doing that is called mindfulness, but what's been around for quite a long time in psychology is progressive muscular relaxation, which is what mindfulness is. It's learning how to manage yourself and be aware of your breathing. The second part of controlling activation is getting your sleep, your diet, your exercise right. We increasingly recognise the restorative effects of sleep. I think I was reading the other day NASA research where if you have a 20-minute nap, maybe a 15-20-minute nap, you get a 3-hour benefit of that in terms of cognitive performance. So getting our sleep right every night and maybe using strategic naps is powerful. We know that we can eat certain foods which almost crash our body, if you like. We call these high glucose index foods. So the sugar spikes very quickly in our body after eating it, and it can kind of cause an energy crash where we feel high and then we crash again. So we need to make sure that we're consuming the right kind of foods. And then thirdly, exercise is a great activation tool. We can generate very clever neurotransmitters in our brain when we're moving around, things like BDNF, again, things like dopamine, things like noradrenaline. These neurotransmitters, these brain proteins, are essential for cognitive function and being able to concentrate on the things that we need to concentrate on. And in this sort of world which is full of distractions, when we're sitting at our desks, when we're trying to have good downtime, it's really important to have, an ability to control your concentration. Otherwise, you just end up paying attention to what your ape brain finds most stimulating, which is new, fast, sort of interesting information, which might not always be a descriptor of the thing that you need to pay attention to, to get your work done. So, yeah, controlling breathing is one way to manage activation. But really, if you're going to get it right, you need to get your sleep, your diet, your exercise really nailed down.
I suppose, as you always say, as you say many times, lifestyle, broader lifestyle is the key to that. Jon, just one final quick one before we conclude this podcast. Worth pointing out, perhaps, that the All Blacks didn't just decide suddenly to make this change, and it happened. They had to go through, as I understand it, and again from the accounts that are publicly available, a fairly robust process of training and rethinking, if you like, to really cement this new understanding and this new process into their performance.
Yeah, it's a mental six-pack. You don't get a six-pack by going to the gym once or doing a few sit-ups. You've got to work at it. You've got to practice it. Not just practice it really well. And it takes time. I think the understanding would be it takes about 20 hours to learn a new skill to a decent level. So, 20 hours of managing breathing control, for example, in the context where you need to control it, it's going to take a lot of time. So, personal change is not easy, but it's hugely achievable. And if you want to, maximise your health, your happiness, your performance, that's something that you have to accept. There's no quick fix. You've got to put the work in, put the practice in, because for all the things that you're not happy about in your life, or for all the bits of your performance that aren't going right, you're putting tons of practice into that, into getting it wrong lots and lots and lots, and to being unhappy by beating yourself up too much, or by being unhealthy and eating the wrong food, or getting your sleep wrong, or not getting your exercise right. So, we're always practicing our habits, but it's often we're just reinforcing the unhelpful ones. So we have to recognise that to get helpful habits established, it does take time, it does take persistence, but you can do it if you want to do it, and everyone's capable of changing themselves.
We hope you've enjoyed listening to this Tougher Minds podcast, which discussed activation, a concept within the elite business athlete, the free Tougher Minds ebook, which explains how performance secrets from global sporting icons can be beneficial and transformative for everyone. You can download the Elite Business Athlete from tougherminds.co.uk. Remember, it's totally free. You've been listening to the Tougher Minds podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Habit Mechanic podcast. If you liked it, please subscribe and tell someone else about one of the ideas or insights that you found most interesting.